this is what I've been wanting to ask.
Some research.
Oh well, no, this is something I'm excited about asking you because you were there. Well, you are just talking, but I want to know because.
Oh no, I want to shape the interview and have it.
Da-da-da.
The interview's got to have an arc. Oh no.
That was actually what I wanted to ask you. Was if you were going to scat out anything, what would it be right now? And you just did it. You anticipated. But you were in London in the comedy scene in the '70s when it was like.
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. Listen, I was not. I was not hip at all. What you have to know about me is I'm not trendy. I was in the Black White Minstrel show. I was not blacked up because that would be redundant. Look up redundant in the dictionary and you'll see a picture of me blacked up like a Black White Minstrel. It didn't happen. I was a comedian. I did 12 minutes in the first half of the show. And the thinking behind that was, and I quote, well, by the time they've got to the interval, Lenny, they've forgotten you were on. Gotta love these people, right? So I did that for 5 years and managed to claw my way out of there. And then in 1980, when alternative comedy was starting, with Rick Mayall and Alexis Earle and Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders and Arnold Brown and people like that, they just decided to rewrite the manifesto for comedy on stage, which was basically, you can be racy and sexy, but you shouldn't really be racist or sexist. So any jokes that demean people for the colour of their skin or their gender or their sexuality were out. And it meant that you had to be cleverer with the kind of humour you did. So you could fool around and goof around, you could joke about your upbringing or your origins or your family or your class or the things you did at work or how you were psychologically, but you couldn't really do boob jokes or darky jokes or stuff like that. And so I embraced that and said, yeah, I want to be like that too. I want to be that kind of comedian. I don't want to be the other kind of comedian.
Is it true that, because I was told by when I spent some time over in London, I was told that it used to be you go to a working men's club and they just have a board with jokes on it and people would cross them off as they did them and everyone just had
I don't know about that. I do know that when they did the comedians they had there was a television series called The Comedians in Britain and they used to have lots and lots of whiteboards with jokes written on them and it was always a scrabble for who would get the best jokes and the comedians were people like Colin Crompton and Bernard Manning and Charlie Williams and Joss White and Mike Burton and people like that and they would basically do a guy, I went to the doctor the other day and I said, doctor, I've got a strawberry growing up my bum. He said, hang on, I've got some cream you can put on that. They do jokes like that. Doctor, I've got some lettuce growing up my bum as well. He said, you know, that's just the tip of the iceberg. They do jokes like that.
And there was but then alternative
But
comedy
worse
was
than that. But alternative comedians would do material about, you know, growing up as a middle class kid or growing up as a Jewish guy or you know, when I started to do stuff like this, I would talk about my mum being very strict. And often, how funny is this? The worst things that happen to you as a kid become the funniest things as an adult because you've got perspective now. So my mum was a very strict matriarch, so she would hit me a lot if I did something wrong because that's the Jamaican way. You just hit a chest, spare the rod, find a tree. So you just get hit with a tree. Or a frying pan or my mum threw a chair at me. It was like living with Bruce Willis. My mum went to the Tom and Jerry school of discipline. Boy, come here! Remember those fights with Hulk and Thing in the 60s where they used to pick up lorries and trailers and whole buildings to hit you with? That's what it was like in our house. Len! The whole building, you're mad! So it was like that when I was growing up. So I suddenly found that I had this voice and I could talk about being a member of the black community and having Jamaican parents and having a facility for doing voices. That all came into play, plus the impressions, and suddenly I was a multiple threat. You know, I could do lots of different things, and that became my shtick. Rather than going, hello Betty, I could do my dad, Len, or I could do my uncle Clifton, Len, or I could do Early, hello, hello, hello. So I had all these voices that were coming out of me that I knew, but the public didn't know. And what was interesting was, the more authentic I became with the material, the funnier I got. So the closer I got to who I really was, the more they laughed.
Because it's all that is that comedy now, it's not jokes, it's all, you want to go see someone talk about themselves.
Well, yeah,
it's funny.
Do the writing. I mean, if you go see Daniel Kitson, I wouldn't say that Daniel does jokes per se, but he's got some bloody funny lines in his show. And I think that's what you've got to do. When there does come a point where you go, you know what, charm isn't going to get me very far here. I better start writing some material. So you've got to write the show, but then in the end, your personality and your sort of charm, your charisma will get you through the rest of it. But you've got to write.